Well, welcome back, everybody, to the Rice Report. We are being joined today by Professor Dave Collum from Cornell University, professor in organic chemistry, a man of many talents, many bases of knowledge, far beyond chemistry. He's worked with pharmaceutical companies. He's worked in deep research, university research. He also has tremendous opinions about the economy, the political system, and what's happening today. And we're going to get a little bit in the end into spirituality and religion and faith and focus and what that means for humanity. So if you will, please welcome very warmly Professor Dave Collum. Thanks for coming here today, Dave.
So I'm back. We're going to do a stitch on the previous one?
Yeah, I think we will. So it's
standalone.
Yeah, Dave and I did an interview earlier last week, and my camera cut out every 20 or 30 minutes. So we're recording this. Hopefully, I still have the content. We'll put it out there because it was very entertaining. I was entertained the entire time, so I hope you guys will be as well.
I'm self-entertaining, so I'm always entertained when I'm talking.
I always have a good time. We actually have our off-camera recorded today, and we laugh a lot before we get on here. But it's laughing matters and the economy generally don't mix. But right now, things are all over the place. What are you seeing right now, Dave? Where are you seeing the economy go before Trump takes office and after he takes office? What are your views right now?
Well, I think the economy is actually tanking. I ask people and I get different answers, but I think, the consumer, went from, COVID money to credit card money to private debt to all these different sources of ways to pay their bills. You can't crank up the prices of goods 40% and have people happy.
Right.
And able to buy what they want to buy and things like that. So I think you can see it in things like various companies like Target and stuff reporting bad numbers and some very smart guys say the numbers are all going down. What's made it cloudy is huge influx of money into government jobs last year because it was an election year, and huge influx of bad numbers because it was an election year. And so now someone's going to pull back the curtain and we're going to find out we're screwed. And it's normal, right? This is just the business cycle, ebbs and flows. And I think we've reached the end of our leash now, and we're about to hit it hard.
Well, the stats couldn't be any worse.
Bear trap joke about the guy who talks about the most painful thing he ever felt, where he says the second worst thing was squatting down over a bear trap and getting clamped in the groin. And the doctor says, "Oh my God, what was the worst?" He said, "When I got to the end of the chain."
That's a pretty descriptive analogy.
That's a metaphor. The end of
absolutely. The and that's where we are. I mean, we have 738 billion in unrealized losses in the top 4 banks in the country. That's just the top 4. So we're well over a trillion.
That's not the regionals, right?
Correct.
The regionals, I've seen estimates of 300 regionals. You go, well, that's not that many. Well, there it is, because we destroyed most of them back in 08, 09. So the fact they were able to stop the big 4 after they collapsed, Silicon Valley and the rest, was stunning. And I don't even really understand how they pulled it off. I didn't get a good read on what they did to stop the cascading failure that should have ensued.
Well, what they did first was they violated the Dodd-Frank Act and bailed out the first 2.
Right.
And then they opened up the Treasury buyback program, and they amplified reverse repo. So they just created all kinds of false liquidity for banks over 3 years.
I heard about that, but I wasn't paying close enough attention to really understand the magnitude of what they were doing, but it must have been spectacular. At some point, reality comes in, right? Reality always has a way of sticking its nose under the tent. So I think reality's coming now that we have a new president, and there's plenty of people who don't want to see him succeed. But I think if it blows out now, he can blame Biden and then have a second 2 years that does okay. Maybe.
Or from what it looks like, they'll prop it up until after he's in office and then let it collapse and
blame it. He can still blame it on Biden, though. He can still blame it on Biden. He wanted to collapse soon. The longer it doesn't collapse, the more it gets hung on him.
Yeah, and the worse the collapse becomes, right? So
it's like any other metastable. One of the things physical science taught me is the further from equilibrium you get, the more destructive the path home.
Yeah.
So that's a bomb, an avalanche, an earthquake. You say, oh, we're fine in California. We haven't had an earthquake in 100 years. You go, well, the next one's going to be a doozy then, right?
Yeah, it's just that coiled spring or the beach ball below the water.
That's right. So
how do you see that cascading? I mean, of course, we can't hold you to it because nobody knows, but how do you see it cascading from it? There's no way stock markets are sustainable at these PE ratios on average. All this foreign money pouring in. We have a top-heavy economy. Even if you look at the actual economy itself.
And the foreign money could pour out, too.
As soon as quickly as it came in.
And here's that. So Mike Green is the goat for passive investing. At first, I thought it was a fairly simple analysis he was doing. I'm going, okay, but Mike understands it way better than I was giving him credit. He really understands some serious nuance in it. And one of the things that catches your eye is the passive investing created a nonstop group of buyers for decades. And he thinks it's now starting to roll over. He says it's not been growing. He thinks it's topping. It might be rolling over. You can look at the plots, and Vanguard's inflows are stagnating.
Mm-hmm.
And what would cause it to roll over? Well, recession. Let's start there. Boomers getting rid of some of their equities, and once it starts, boomers getting rid of more because they know, hey, I've got X gazillion in the bank, but I can't live on half X gazillion, so I got to get it out of harm's way. That's how the panics run. There is no cash in the bank. And the cash on the sidelines is a stupid trope that I just drives me nuts. I resolved it in my head 20 years ago, and I keep hearing it. But because money doesn't flow into markets. But if those accounts have no cash, then as soon as any redemption appears, they have to sell.
Right.
And so those passive flows will, when the redemptions show up, those passive flows will become passive flows the other way. And then he asks rhetorically the question, who's going to be the buyers? The short sellers historically sold at the top and bought at the bottoms, which caused them to round out the spikes and the dips. They played that role. They don't exist anymore. The short sellers are all gone.
Yeah. So the stock, I mean, the stock market itself, I just got back from Palm Beach meeting with a ton of investors, and some are scared, some are in exuberance right now, irrational exuberance. We've heard that before. And they're just like, well, I don't know. I don't see how it can go down. Who
invented that phrase? You know who invented that phrase?
I don't actually. Was that Bernanke?
Well, Greenspan grabbed it, but Bob Schiller coined it about 2 years earlier.
And he was right. Irrational exuberance.
Right. Yeah.
Dead right. And we have that too. We have the same stock market positioning as 2000 right now. We have the PE ratios.
Feel exuberant, right? There's something.
Depends where you go.
This is not the oh wow, life is grand. I think we talked last time, and you probably still have it on tape and can resurrect it from the archive. That for a top, we're awfully grumpy.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point.
I fear what the bottom will look like if we're this grumpy at the top.
What do you think the bottom looks like?
Half of everyone's wealth and ask them how they feel now.
That's what my saying's been for many, many years, is like the money is the wake up. Once you realize that everything was an illusion and it corrects itself back to reality, then you have real civil unrest. The whole curmudgeon stage begins on the bottom.
Getting corked.
Yeah, right? That's a sad situation. There's no way that's guys doing good things, but no way does somebody deserve to be hunted down in the street and shot.
Right, but there's no way there's no way that you can profess to not understand it also.
Oh, yeah, of course.
To endorse it to say, I totally understand it.
Correct. Yeah, what they go, we went from 6% denial claims when then he got yelled at by the shareholders.
32 or something now.
37. Yeah, 37% of claims were denied by United Health.
Right.
I mean, that times 100 million insured.
And then I'm debilitated knowing we talked last time. But then 2 days later, Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield, in what I believe was probably loaded in the chamber, ready to be fired, and someone was not smart enough to pull the live round out of the chamber, announced that they wouldn't cover protracted anesthesia bills if the surgery went too long.
That's right.
And all of a sudden, the CEO must have pulled that one fast. They retracted that one fast because the CEO's going, look, don't cap me on this one.
Yeah,
we're retracting that right now. But that shows you their mindset.
Yeah, I've been saying for years, I'm like, insurance by itself should be an option. Like car insurance, very like mathematically speaking, car is the best example. You're forced to have car insurance, or you have some sort of legal penalty, which makes it a mandate, makes it a tax. And it's, mine's with a teenage kid. Mine's going to be about $800 a month when he gets his license. That's almost $10,000 a year. Say nothing happens, and 10 years later, there's no car accident. I'd have $100,000 of my own money at 8%. I'd be at about $178,000, or excuse me, I'd be at $200,000 plus. And if I get into a car accident, the car he has is about $30,000 car. So why do I need insurance again? Really, the
other thing is the insurance could be a sort of on you, not them. So you have insurance so that potentially insurance so that you are protected from having hurt somebody, right? Mandated, no.
Right.
Or you say, look, if you want to insure yourself against a car, any car, here's how you get the policy, right? So you might get $1 million policy saying if at any point anyone clobbers me, that policy covers me.
But it's also a double-edged sword, because go talk to a lawyer, and a lawyer will never sue someone who doesn't have insurance. They never do it.
Absolutely. In fact, my wife had a back surgeon, or a neurosurgeon, who had $1 million policy. And I go, that's not enough.
No.
He said, no, it is, because they'll sue me for $1 million.
Right. And that's it. But if he didn't have insurance at all, they wouldn't sue him at all.
Yeah.
So that's the tax, the double-edged sword. The legal system actually kind of runs the financial markets, because insurance are some of the biggest. Go to a major city, any major city in America, the biggest building in the city will have an insurance company's logo on the top.
Oh, yeah. Like
every one of them.
Or New York or anything. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, Allianz or one of the big guys. And there's a reason for that. You come to Texas, it's always an oil company. But other than here, it's generally insurance.
I thought about that. Yeah, that's true.
Well, Dave, let's get into.
I got talked into buying RLI, which is an insurance company. So Porter Stansberg was sitting in his green room one day at one of his meetings. He said, buy RLI, it's an insurance company. I asked him, well, what about this? What about that? And he answered. So I bought some. Here's a problem I face as a boomer investor. And it got reinforced this year. I write up my annual returns. I formally write it up. And this year I did it a little differently. I just talked about the returns, but this year I ordered them in order of decreasing percentage of my net worth. And I actually categorized them. So above 10%, 1 to 10%, 0.1 to 1%, that sort of thing. And what I was reminded of, I'm smart enough to be able to do this calculation, but I was reminded of is that probably 80% of my investments were not relevant. Now, what are they? I'm not a big believer, Rick Rule said something like, got a hunch by a bunch, you'll end up in trouble.
Yeah.
So when I got into gold, I averaged in. When I got into energy and the knots, I averaged in. When I got into equities after 87 crash, I averaged in. So I that's the way to do it, in my opinion. But most of my investments are in this stupid category where they're small enough where if they went to zero that day, I wouldn't necessarily close in the red. Right. So that's not sizing it. That's not Stan Druckenmiller, right? That's not sizing it. But what they are is Post-its reminding me that when it is time to get aggressive, you have your list now.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm mostly cash. I mean, my biggest position is cash.
Money
cash
markets.
Equivalents, 2-year treasuries.
Oh, yeah.
And you say, well, what if you want to use it, before 2 years even? I go, this will save me because I don't buy shit that needs to be done in 2 years.
I agree with that.
Right.
Yeah, look for the best asset going.
Who's the guy who ran Magellan? Come on. Peter
Lynch? Yeah.
Yeah, I think he said, during some crash, maybe it was the 87 crash, he said, fortunately, he was out of the country on a remote tropical island or something. He said, I didn't have time to respond. So if he had, he would have made a mistake.
That's true. Yeah, let things ride out. It's generally a good policy to have in turbulent
Although
times.
buy and hold at overvalued markets is a bad idea.
It's a horrible idea. Actually, the only thing I'm long in the stock market is the VIX. That's the only thing that I'm long. That's it.
Here, that's even too rich for me. If you own the 29 crash, the question I like to ask, and I've made a chart of this, if you do an inflation-adjusted plot of the S&P, anyone can do this. Find an inflation-adjusted plot of the S&P and ask the question, how long does it take to go from one of the really serious tops, 06, 29, 67, that sort of thing. How long does it take to get from the serious top to recovery to the same price, not for the first time, but the last time? And it turns out I draw these little blue arrows across where it goes from 29 and reaches across the chart. And that arrow gets pinged for the last time. Hopefully it's the last time, right?
Right.
Anywhere from 40 to 75 years later. So If you own the top, you're going to die. Now, there's going to be ebbs and flows. But for example, the Nikkei, right? It finally, 35 years, it finally recovered. You think it's not going to go back? I think it's going back.
I think it's going back hard.
So they're going to lose that top yet again.
Now, last time we talked when my camera didn't work, you were talking about this exact scenario. So we have the top now, we have a crash, and it could be 4 decades before we actually recover back to where we are now. Are you still in that same thought process?
That's my case. And it's not based on projecting anything bad. It's based on arithmetic. It's based on when you get way overvalued, if you have to block and tackle your way out by growing your wealth, right? By inflation adjusted making progress at 2.5% a year GDP. And you say, well, is that the right metric? Well, to the extent GDP reflects the S&P, yeah, that is the right metric if you measure it correctly, which they don't.
Mm-hmm.
At 2.5%, if you're 200% overvalued at 2.5% growth in GDP, it takes 45 years to get even.
45 years.
To get to what I call fair value. Yeah.
Yeah, and you went back into the 1800s on that chart.
I define fair value as 1880 to 1990, the average.
Wow, 45 years.
We took off in 1994, actually. 1994 is when we left the channel to never really look back. People don't even know in 2009, the bottom was below historical average valuation for about a month. And that's not just me. Grantham finally admitted that. I had dinner one night with Mark Spitznagel, and he said, yeah, about a month is right. And so other people noticed that. It felt like it was dirt cheap because we just fallen like some Red Bull stunt from a satellite or something. And we'd fallen so far, it felt like it was dirt cheap. It wasn't dirt cheap. And that's why, in some sense, I missed the equity rage of the teams, because I saw another halving in our future. And the Fed says, oh, no, you don't, and put 30 trillion in.
30 trillion, that's right.
30 trillion globally, yeah.
Yeah. And so global capital for global market for capital right now is about $930 trillion, right? All of your,
right?
Yeah, 930 trillion.
Oh, I didn't know it was that big, actually. I would have guessed a smaller number.
So in that large market, you have everything from stocks and bonds, anything liquid, money markets, Bitcoin, gold, silver, all that type of stuff. I know you're a big gold bug, and you told me the story before. Can you tell everybody when you started buying gold and why and how you got here? And then I want to get your view on gold for the next 5-6 years.
Well, so I was buying gold, a lot of it between 290 and 270. And the reason I reversed those two is because I was buying it down.
Sure.
So I got out of equities in 99 completely. I bought the Y2K story. It was a grift.
Yes.
But it was not a minor grift. It was a major grift. So so the world really did. Some of us, I dug deep and I could not rule out the possibility that we were going to have real trouble. And so I went through the whole supply chain shock thing and stuff like that. And I really did the math and said, if all of a sudden you can't get toilet paper, you can't get, this is what'll happen. Mm-hmm. So I prepared for it. And I was told one thing very important. And some guy said, don't do anything that requires a disaster for you to be okay.
Yeah. Don't
do that. So don't short the entire market, that sort of thing. And then it turns out it was fake. And the way I've talked to CEOs of software companies who say, no, we fixed it. I go, no, we didn't, because if we had, there would have been little blowups and little explosions in Argentina and various places that didn't fix it. And there was nothing. It was literally nothing. And so it was a grift. And it was a grift, I think, created by Silicon Valley, Wall Street, to sell software and hardware.
Sure.
And so that was but I took it seriously. So I was out of equities by mid-99, in part because I figured out the markets were nuts. I'd also figured out that Y2K could blow them the hell up. And what was really appealing was that model left a date. A target date. Right?
An exact date.
Better than any other bubble in history, there was a target date for the Y2K clowns, right? Well, we hit 2000, nothing happened. And I said, no, I'm not going back in these markets. Now, I've been buying gold through 99, from 290 down to 270. I was buying it in Central Fund of Canada, which was something like, it's either 17 or 27% below NAV.
Wow.
And so I was buying gold operationally at 240. It was really ridiculously cheap. I was buying silver too through Central Fund. I was also buying physical and stuff like that. I even shorted the market. I even shorted it, not a big chunk, but I got 30% on that move. Nice. So I came out of so gold didn't bottom until 2001. And I actually called it. I was on Cornell Economics Report. Why they invited me back in 2001, I don't remember. But I said, something's happened. They said, what do you mean? And I said, the Bank of England, when the price of gold starts going up, the Bank of England announces they're going to sell, and it gets pounded. And then if it starts going up again, they sell, and then it gets pounded. And I said, months ago, they said they were going to sell, and it went up, not down. And then they just sold some, and it went up, not down.
Trigger event.
And so I said, something has changed in the gold market. Now, I have people say, it was easy to buy gold. It was so cheap back then. It was cheap because there were about 5 of us who were buying it. And no one else wanted it. No one wanted it. It's called the brown bottom. It's Gordon Brown sold England's gold right down into the bottom. And then I held it the whole way. So my cost basis is low. After it hit 1900 and then shamed me a little bit back down to 1100 or something. Around 1200, it sat there, and my highly limited sense of technical analysis told me, okay, you can buy another slug now. It looks like it's kind of stabilized. So I bought another wad at 1200, which has been fine. But my returns in the knots, my returns in the 80s and the 90s and the knots were phenomenal. My returns in the teens were really mediocre while everyone partied, while they're doing ketamine and buying stocks. I was sitting there. I think I did a 4% annual return over the teens.
Still positive, and you're still holding on to gold from 270, 290, trading at 2,700.
Kind of positive because I kind of climbed out towards the end there, and then the question is, what's going forward? Boy, the Trump administration is a pea soup fog over everything.
Yes, it is. It's crazy to see right now because we have gold stores here, the Treasury. You have Michael Saylor talking about selling the gold, buying Bitcoin. You have gold reserves popping up everywhere: Honduras, El Salvador, China, one in Peru. I think these gold reserves, everybody's known about. It's like oil. I was in oil and gas when they said, "Oh, Guyana has this huge. We found a bunch of oil in Guyana." I'm like, guys, it's on this map that's in my office that's been here since 1989, showing a huge pocket of oil. So they didn't just find it; they just told us about it.
The reserves keep growing as we chew up reserves. The reserves are defined as what we can right now get out of the ground, and as you dig it out, they find more reserves, and that's even in the same mine, right? I don't worry about that because, first of all, I mean, there are these reports I think are people who are trying to short the gold, So gold and silver get smacked around by the big banks, I'm pretty sure. Not to necessarily manipulate the price in a big way, like in a Paul Volcker memo sort of way, which is out there, but rather just to day trade the damn stuff. And so they get caught on the wrong side in a big short position, so they find some way to smack it. I've never known how you smack it, because you got to short it to smack it. So but they know where the stops are. They know where the positions are. They know how to mow through someone's buy order or sell order.
You ever go? So you're a chemistry professor, so you've definitely had dinners with some really boring people in your career. And if you ever want to destroy the boringness of any meeting you've had, go to dinner with 3 gold traders.
Right. So I go to these research meetings, and it's a different kind of person at these meetings.
Yes, it is.
You can look at the crowd and go, "Oh, I'm at a gold meeting, aren't I?" Right?
Yep.
As I joked about, I said, you can tell a gold bug because they're the guy with the big bar of tungsten in their pocket.
That's right. But now we have this conversation. We have BRICS talking about gold-backed currencies, all these foreign banks buying gold. Trump's talked about gold-backed.
The BRICS could be big.
It could be if they can organize themselves. That's the only issue that they have. It could be big. But I also did an interview with Steve Forbes last year, and he was saying that he and Trump have had conversations about a gold-backed U.S. dollar. But there's so many problems inherent with this. We're entering the age of digital monitoring, right? Everything is going to AI. Lots of talk about quantum coming out in the past week, which is an area I'm excited people are getting into because it's an area I understand very well. But this gold-backed currency and tokenization of gold, the problem with gold-backed currencies has always been the track record. Not a single one's ever made it. Not a single gold-backed currency's ever made it, because eventually you have corrupt politicians that end up raiding the Treasury. Now, what are your thoughts on the people coming into office right now? Because we had a good conversation about that too. Who are your favorite picks? Who are your least favorite picks for Trump's cabinet that he's put together so far?
Well, I'm resisting saying too much about any of them because, first of all, they're not in.
Correct.
Second of all, what I've urged people to do is to assume that Trump is smarter than his opponents think.
Yep.
To assume that his inner circle is helping him.
Yes.
And therefore to assume that what looks like a bad appointment may be one you just don't understand.
Yeah, I agree with
that.
So
I think he's building a team of brawlers. Many of his team have shark bites from battles against the deep state.
Yeah.
And so as a consequence of that, some of these guys have it's personal for them at this point. So guys like Patel,
he's one of my favorite picks so far, by the way.
Tulsi Gabbard, these are serious players. I don't know how they're going to dovetail Musk and Ramaswamy in there, but if you've read Elon's biography, and you will realize that you have never, ever seen a person who could cut a cost like Elon can cut a cost. So if they give, he buys Twitter and fires 90% of the staff. Who the hell does that, right?
And it runs better than it did before.
20%, it would have been a bloodbath, right? 90. and it ran better. And he knows that. And he would face, for example, he'd be looking at some Boeing refrigeration unit for one of his rockets for $1.5 million, and he'd go down to Walmart and buy 2 off the shelf and cobble them together and say, this will do it, right? And so I believe that if Elon were somehow given the power of the machete, he could, he could take out FEMA, boom, day one, 29 billion right there. Now
That's got to go.
Drop in the bucket, but it's a Pyrrhic victory. It's a win. It's a holy shit. It's like when Reagan fired the air traffic controllers. It had this huge sort of rippling effect on labor management balances in the country.
I remember that.
And it's not that one event was important. It's like the what I call the incredibly flammable Tunisian who started Arab Spring.
That's right.
So the guy might get credit as actually this Malay guy. He has shown what you can do with the machete. He
has torn it apart. They're at 2.7% inflation in Argentina.
Right.
Argentina has the worst inflation in the world. For anyone watching this that doesn't understand, Argentina's inflation has been in the over 100 percentile range. I think 13 out of the last 20 years. Over 100%.
6 times in 100 years and things like that. They have a problem. Yeah. Now, here's one thing, especially for the hodlers who are listening to Trump talk about Bitcoin or anything.
Mm-hmm.
Someone said it brilliantly. You should take Trump seriously, but not literally.
It's good advice for anyone, to be honest.
And as a consequence, therefore, everything for him is some negotiating line being thrown out there.
Yeah.
And so you have to ask why. My guess is we can't fathom it until it starts to unwind and show up for what it is. So, for example, Rubio, everyone hates the Rubio appointment. I go, why don't you give Trump administration credit for knowing what they're doing and ask why?
Mm-hmm. Instead
Rubio
of just
could
complaining.
just be a chameleon, right? He could be, they talked to Rubio and said, here's the deal, we're going to do this. And if you're with us, fine, you can help. But if not, you're getting sent, on a fast boat down the Potomac, fast.
Yeah.
So you make the call, but don't you stab my ass in the back. We're playing serious ball. Are you in or are you out, right? One of the things Rubio has is if we are going to be deporting people to South America, Rubio not only supposedly speaks Spanish, but apparently it's the real rat-a-tat-tat South American Spanish.
Hmm.
He is that might be an incredibly important asset for a guy who's got to deal with the countries who we're sending people back to.
I didn't think about that. That's actually a pretty good point. Yeah, the communication channels open, the blend of culture, the ease of understanding of the policy.
And Trump, by the way, despite what the left has tried to do to his image, I've not seen any hard evidence that Trump has moral fiber problems beyond just at times being a bit of a lout. So, yeah, I'm sure he's grabs girls' asses and stuff like that. But, sorry, but the Y chromosome has a little bit of that wired into it.
Yes, it does.
But I don't think he has the deep immorality, which guys like I think Biden has, possibly a lot of the others. I think Trump does have a moral streak in him that doesn't translate into him treating, for example, competitors in the marketplace well, right?
Right.
So I read a 1984 article about him as a contractor, as a developer, and they interviewed all these people, and they all said he was infuriating.
Yeah, he's cutthroat.
But he always seemed to get what he wanted. They couldn't figure out how he did it. And I'm going, that's the guy I want president. Right?
Absolutely.
You just convinced me.
Give me the guy everybody hates who gets the job done. I don't need bedside manner and a doctor just save my life.
Step aside. So Musk, Ramaswamy, Trump, I'm hoping. Now, a year from now, we'll know. I don't think if it takes longer than a year, then he's disappointed me.
I agree with that. That's a good. Give him 400 days or so to see it from here.
Day one. It would be great if we could give him a wish list. Day one, blanket pardon for all the J6ers, every last one of them. Don't try to cherry pick. And I know some of the guys probably did some bad shit. Across the board, gone, out, empty the prisons. Day two, FEMA, right?
We'll close the border. Close the border.
Close the border. Yeah, and the border. They can close the border
in 48 hours.
That's right. I've done a bunch of, this JJ Carroll guy who's kind of the world expert. I've done a couple of podcasts with JJ. It's been interesting because I've watched his understanding of what he's looking at evolve. So the first time I did it was about the border. And then the next time also this new world order shit. I'm going, oh, he's taking the
going down the hole
finally. Oh my God. And so JJ, his super enthusiasm for Trump is potentially a weakness for his story because it means he's already lost half the country.
Sure.
right? So when you go wild enthusiasm for Trump, although now it's not crazy. I even think there must be Democrats. It's like when Obama got elected. I didn't support his politics, but I'm going, this is kind of cool.
Yeah, it's different.
Right? We got a black president. The guy speaks in whole sentences, unlike Bush.
Right.
Right. This is fine by me. Let's do this experiment. This is a good one. And he might have been awful. I hear people talk about how awful he was, but it's never quite gotten in my
policy,
head.
He was terrible on policy, horrific on policy.
I know, but it somehow has never gotten into my skull like Harris got into my skull big time. She just scared the shit out of me as president. The idea of her being, I now in my blog that I'm writing, I call her the former future president.
The former future president. That's a great title. You should put that on a business card.
I'm going to be writing about her a lot. Yes. I realized the 2024 election was not about Trump at all. It was about Harris.
Yeah.
Exposing Harris and the Democratic Party. That's the whole story.
Not a single primary vote, nothing, complete dictatorial.
But it's just the total self-destruction of the DNC.
Yeah.
That is what the story is. The rest is just noise.
Well, I'm gonna rewind and I'm fast forward. So I'm gonna rewind and go back to the hodlers. I want to hear what you have to say on that, and then I want to go into Kamala Harris MKUltra because we talked about that in the last episode, and that was fascinating.
So did I answer your questions? Okay, on the Trump appointments, but we won't know until.
No, I'm in complete agreement. That's why I was asking you, because I don't talk about it. I'm the same way. I was like, no, maybe Dave will go out there on a limb. I love Cash Patel and FBI.
A friend of mine named Tim Price, who manages money in London. And I've never heard him like this, where we hung out a lot at a meeting together one day, but he was talking about how insane the world is now.
Mm-hmm.
I know so many people are going, this is just on a whole nother plane insane. And it's always the question, are we seeing it finally, or is it really insane? I asked a friend whose brother's CIA, and I said, does your brother think it's normal or not? And he says, oh, no, it's nuts. His brother thinks the world's gone nuts.
Well, I think, but it's also the same way. It's always been nuts. It's not like transgender is new. It's just thrown in our face now.
It's now super nuts is the problem.
Yes.
People who I think could see what it was like before behind the curtain say what you're seeing coming out from behind the curtain is nuts compared to what they could see behind the curtain.
The craziest part about it all is how normalized the nuts has become. Like there was like 300 people who identify as dogs that surrounded Buckingham Palace or something the other day. They wanted human rights as canines. And this was normal to people. You know, they have dog masks on. They're on all fours. I mean, the world is absolutely
Let me bring up a possible alternative explanation. You know, these chicks who go on Twitter or something and inside their car. Why does everyone go inside their car?
I've never understood that.
Thing, right? And they're ranting and raving like some hot chick will say, I can't meet a guy. And I'm going, well, because you're doing YouTube from inside your car. There's a stability issue at stake here, right? One of my colleagues, one of my former students said, if you go on the dating apps, it's a bunch of lefties. The chicks are lefties.
That's right.
And the reason is, I think quite straightforward, is because even though you might be going there because you think you just want to get some action, biologically, your brain is saying you're hunting for a mate. And the left-wing women are not mate material. No. You get some right-wing chick who says, oh, yeah, it's my job to make sure you're happy. It's like, I want that one.
Yeah. Sold.
And by the way, I love your butt.
Yeah, like our first date's tomorrow. I'll be there with a ring.
That's right. Let's get married now.
You want kids too? Oh, ring and flowers.
And so I think some of these wackos that really make the left look bad, they could be sort of the modern era equivalent of the guys at Harvard fraternities who would write penthouse letters to try to get them published.
Right.
So I think, okay, now I got it. Watch this one. I'm going to post it tonight, right? You know, and I think they've got to be gaming us, right?
Oh, we're getting gamed everywhere. There's UFOs in New Jersey. First they were drones, then they were Iran.
One was asking me about it. And I'm just barely alert to the shit this week because of writing. What do you think the UFO story is?
Well, what I know what it's not. I know it's not a mothership from Iran. They've already declared that, but that's just ridiculous. It's a mothership.
I'd like to think we'd shoot it down, right?
Well, it's a mothership's a boat. So a boat made it from Iran to America undetected, pulled into the East Coast, and released a swarm of drones the size of minivans. Like, come on, this is a really dumb idea.
One time, Brett Weinstein got asked about the UFOs, the ones that go too fast and change direction and then disappear. And his answer made sense to me. He said, I think they're just projections. They're holograms.
Could very.
And the military, you go, well, I've been to Disney World and that I've seen holograms. You go, you haven't seen 2024 military grade holograms.
7D holograms are very real. They use them in Japan for entertainment. Like a whale will come out of a gym wall and splash on the floor.
We are just getting duped by photons on that one.
Very possible. Very, very possible. And that's actually the Project Bluebeam, right? They'll be on 7D holograms. 7D holograms were patented in like 2011.
And by the way, if you're the military doing these, you want to see how long you can sucker these people.
Of course you do. Yeah, it's gotta be as
the bots who come in, the bots who attack you on Twitter. They used to have a characteristic footprint. It's gotten more subtle, but it used to be some guy named Dave 17231. And you go, that's a computer generated name. Let's start with that. And they would attack you.
Sure.
And then you'd engage if you didn't know better. And I think what they were doing is beta testing AI.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Years ago.
And they've got a perfect metric. How many times do you respond?
Yep.
And the way they get you to respond is by poking you.
Yeah.
Right. And if it was some dating site, they'd tell you they loved you, but they poke you on Twitter. You go, you son of a bitch! I'm going to win this argument on the internet, right? So I would think, on the other hand, in a much more dire situation, these mass shooters. For many, many years, I felt that they're all state sponsored, all of them.
I agree.
Right down to Sandy Hook, right down to all those. By the way, I think the Sandy Hook story is still a little sketchy.
Me too.
I think Alex might have gotten parts of it wrong, but there are still issues with it. But if you are brainwashing people to become assassins, you can't do this with lab rats.
Correct.
It's
got to be real people.
It's got to be real people. It's got to be getting people to do things. And I did a podcast with Nick Bryant, who's one of the real scholars of trafficking. He wrote The Franklin Scandal, which is the best book on trafficking.
Yes, it is.
And he invited me for a podcast. I don't think he even knew I was chasing this bogey. And as a consequence, he wanted to talk about finance. I go, I've got questions for you, bub. And so we did a two-parter: finance first half and trafficking the second. And he said they can brainwash anybody. He said they can do it at will now.
Yeah, it takes zero time for them. Even there's like a set pattern. It started in the 30s. It started in the teens.
You brainwash a kid, and if you can brainwash a Korean POW, Marine, you can brainwash a kid.
Yeah, and it just carries with them the rest of their life. The trigger mechanism's embedded in the subconscious forever.
That's exactly right. And they got all these different personalities they get to tap into. And
you think that's happening with the shooter right now, the United Healthcare shooter? What do you think's happening there?
Quite possible, because for one thing, his background story just doesn't lead to a shooter.
No, not at all.
It reminds me, by the way, is very marginally related, but I always bring it up. John Sullivan, the guy who filmed Ashley Babbitt getting shot. John Sullivan, the guy who was Antifa-izing his way through a bunch of protests and stuff.
Who got $80,000 for selling the video.
Yeah. Antifa, I went back and found these. Antifa was saying, don't trust this guy, he's a Fed. He's a Fed. He's a Fed. And then he just so happens to film Ashley Babbitt, right? And then it turns out that here's a question I like to ask. Here's John Sullivan's background story. The question is, does this make him a Fed or Antifa? His background story is he was a nationally ranked cyclist. Antifa's a bunch of losers who've got nothing left.
Yeah, that wear women's underwear.
Or they're Feds, right? Or they're Feds, right?
Very, very much so.
But a guy who's a nationally ranked cyclist has a sense of achievement, purpose, self-worth. That guy's going to the FBI or whatever. Now, he's in jail for 5 years. You know why? He was expendable.
Yeah. Yeah.
He didn't realize he could be written out of the plot.
They never do, especially when you're getting paid $80,000 for a video. I'm sure he got plenty for it.
Those guys who got tried, those 4 guys who got tried for kidnapping the Michigan mayor.
Yeah.
That was such a criminal case. The prosecutor in that case should have been hung from the neck until dead. I really have no patience. Eye for an eye crap on that guy.
Yeah, and it's happened so often around here.
Yeah, Daniel Penny, right?
Yeah.
That prosecutor should be taken to behind the woodshed.
Well, I've got like 6 or 7 friends that have had to do GoFundMe's for $300,000 or $400,000 for court fees for standing outside of a building on January 6th. Didn't go in, didn't do it. One guy was praying over people.
Right.
$400,000 to defend himself for praying in America.
I've actually thought about if I ever got charged with something, whether I would just refuse to spend any money to defend myself, declare political prisoner, and to say, look, I'm not spending a penny. I'm not going to blow my family's wealth to defend against you douchebags.
Going back to the shooter. So here is the most wanted man in America, right? He's lit his face, the picture of him with the mask on, it's all over America. And the guy decides to pop into a McDonald's with $8 grand, the actual murder weapon.
That story in there.
None of it makes any sense to me at all. If anything, he's
a guy named Walter Kern, who's very, very smart journalist. He has a show with Matt Taibbi, which is so entertaining.
It's really good. Yeah.
Racket News.
Yeah.
He was putting out cryptic tweets like saying, we are being fed this story.
Mm-hmm.
And then he started saying, this is a combination of statecraft and AI. And this is not Walter's normal path. So at some point, I'm going to ask Walter what he's thinking about more specifically.
Yeah, because it's too many questions. So a murderer just carries around every bit of the evidence with him, shows up in a McDonald's on video camera.
It's about as authentic as Ryan Ruth's attempted assassination of Trump, which I've just finished a chapter on.
Well, and now he's declaring insanity and all that kind of stuff. But it reminds me of the Gabby Petito, Brian Laundrie. Remember that?
Yeah, vaguely.
It was just like this, two kids go off into a national park. The girl disappears. The guy comes back home. But then a friend of mine, Aaron, broke it down. He goes, you ever think about their names? And I go, no. And he goes, one's Gabby Petito. What is it to gab? To talk, right? You gab, you're a gabber. Petito's right. Petite, small talk. And then the other one's named Brian, right? Brain laundry washing. Small talk, brainwashing.
It's like an old National Lampoon, huge erection, right?
Yeah. Or how about the teacher? My favorite part of COVID, it was actually when George Floyd's second grade teacher miraculously held on to a drawing he did in second grade 30 years ago that said he wanted to be a Supreme Court justice when he grew up. That's what George Floyd wanted to be. The teacher's name, the teacher's name was Waynell Sexton. Like
what?
Waynell Sexton. Like, look it up. I kid you not. I kid you not. You can't even make this stuff up.
So here's the surreal thing. I do too many podcasts. The percentage of my podcast hosts that have gone down these rabbit holes is now approaching 90%. And as I think I talked to you beforehand, and I can't talk about on air, I had a talk with a podcaster after the fact that went into such dark and unbelievably convincing directions.
Yeah.
That was just stunned to me. And so my podcast hosts, way above 50% at least, are guys who can talk lucidly about trafficking and the problem and deep state and assassinations and project Charles Manson's book Chaos, which I thought I was the only nutball who read it.
No, I got it right here. It's amazing.
I know. And it's a really transformational description. And then all of a sudden, you find out that the guy who groomed Manson to do the crap he was doing. Did you infer from the book that Manson was actually CIA or groomed by CIA?
Groomed by, yeah.
Okay. But then you find out Jack Ruby, the Oklahoma bomber, who I think was a deep state guy himself.
Sure.
What's his McVeigh?
Lee Harvey
Unabomber. A friend of mine was on the Unabomber's list. A guy who altered my career in a very big way when I was young was on the Unabomber's mailing list.
He made it.
He made it. Yeah.
Lee Harvey Oswald, same thing. I don't believe Lee Harvey Oswald.
This has been going on for eons.
I think this guy who was found in McDonald's is the modern day Lee Harvey Oswald. Oswald came out when he was arrested and he said, I'm a patsy.
So I think Ryan Ruth is the patsy of the Trump story, and Cheadle is the political patsy of the Trump story.
That would make sense.
Right. So the entire Trump assassination story, everyone talked about incompetence. I go, yoo-hoo, there's too many things that are beyond incompetence. Hanlon's razor says never attribute to malice that could be just incompetence. I go, Collum's razor is Hanlon was the CIA.
Yep.
Hanlon's razor is to wave you off of action. The other thing I have in my skull is the idea that Hollywood fictionalizes reality.
Hollywood
fictionalizes reality. So you got a bunch of Satanists having bizarre sex. So they make Eyes Wide Shut.
Yeah.
Now it's fiction. Okay.
Of course.
Which, by the way, was filmed in the Rothschild mansion just for fun, just to make it entertaining.
Well, Eyes Wide Shut is actually fascinating because they gave him full creative rights in the film, which never happens in Hollywood. Well, then he premiered it. Then they removed 33 minutes of film, and then he died a week later. Yeah,
that's right.
And in his will, he admitted to that this was an exposure of the Illuminati and that he had filmed the moon landing.
God damn it! This just shows me I can't keep up no matter how hard I try.
But that's a good thing.
Stuff. Now, your audience probably already knows you're nuts, and so they're still happy and saying, "Oh, this is great stuff." But
well, nothing in here is conjecture. This is all factual information. Like, this is all public information. You just have to look deep enough to find it.
Did I tell you about the Army intelligence guy I had a Zoom call with? There were several of us, a number of us on the call, and I asked him about the role of trafficking in geopolitics. Because I've got this image of politicians doing things that don't make sense, period. Open the southern border. Why? Makes no sense. We need laborers. You don't let criminals and enemies of the state across the southern border because you need laborers. Just give them visas, for Christ's sake, right?
That's right.
It's not the money. The money is a distraction. To say Fauci did what he did for the money, Pfizer's not doing well at all. They didn't make money off that deal, right? And so the question is, what gravitational force is pulling these guys to do things that don't make sense? And the answer could be the pedophilia. The pedophilia trafficking story. It means someone cares. By the way, who never gets accused of this? China. Let's go there. So China wants to destroy us. They're not going to pull battleships up to our shore. They're going to get us to destroy ourselves. And if that model's correct, it's working because we are destroying ourselves, right?
Perfect plan thus far.
And so I asked him about it. And this guy's way connected, seriously connected. And I fact checked his butt off. And he said, I did this with Rumsfeld and this with this. And I'm Googling it. And there he is with Rumsfeld, right? That sort of thing. And he got let go because he had too big a mouth. And he was on our Zoom call. And I said, I'm interested in that. And he starts talking about Epstein. I said, well, I kind of got my brain around the Epstein story. And there's details that I'll never know. They're never going to release and stuff. But the basic idea, I think, is probably understandable. I'm interested in the darker stuff, the real dark stuff. And I said, let me ask you this question. I might have told you this last time. I said, is the Clinton Foundation trafficking children? I knew the answer. That's also provable fact.
Very provable.
Very provable. And he said, and I had dinner with Taibbi one night, and I told him this story. And when I asked the rhetorical question, is the Clinton Foundation trafficking children? His eyes sort of rolled back in his head like, oh, that's absurd. And then I said, and his answer was absolutely. And anyway, it went bam, like this at me, right? And I think guys like Taibbi are slowly getting the red pill all the way. Now
they don't want it though. That's the thing. It's their reason. I always tell people in the era we live in, with the ease of distribution of information, you can either take the red pill on your own, or it's going to be a suppository season at some point. Like there's just no way around. You either take the oral pill or the suppository. It's whichever way you like it.
The Fed's going direct. Remember when BlackRock said you got to go direct?
Yes.
Right before they went direct, right? Oh, excuse me, that was good timing. It's a monetary suppository.
That's right.
BlackRock, by the way, I've heard is still buying houses at 1.5% leverage interest rate. How is that remotely fair?
Well, Trump did put together the Fed and the Treasury, and he appointed BlackRock as the asset manager. So
I know how it happens.
Yeah, they have tremendous.
Really not fair. Right?
BlackRock is the Fed. In all practicality, it is the Fed.
How did they knock out Goldman?
Because they wanted to in the end.
But how did Goldman lose that fight?
That's a good question that I don't have the answer.
Or are they all just the same thing?
They're all the same thing. Wall Street is a recreation of tyrannical power that started about 700 years ago when markets were created.
Baphomet, Moloch.
Well, the reality is, if you really want to understand like when I got into the child trafficking topic, which no one wants to get into, but there's a certain point when your discovery of reality, and I don't call it seeking truth, I call it just, seeking reality. There's a certain point.
This is the red pill. That's fictionalizing reality.
That's right. Yeah. So at one point you have to say why, right? When you start to realize how much pedophilia there is in the world, like even during COVID, the amount of child porn on the internet consumption increased by something like 600%. So how would that happen?
Don't look at me.
No, definitely. But when you look at it from that perspective, you have to sit back. I sat back and thought, why? Why do you want this? And when you really started getting into why, and of course there are sick people who just find children attractive, and the Bible clearly says, a millstone in the ocean, right? That's what we have. But there's a darker side to it, and the darker side to it is demonic. And what happens in these occultist, occult means hidden. So occult is a bad term. There are Christ-like occult secrets
Within
as well.
that world, is there a sort of a requirement that you have to also kind of fess up in abstract ways? Like, for example, Tom Hanks gets crushed, right?
Yeah.
Tom Hanks gets pounded. And he seems to kind of lead with his chin a little bit. Is there some sort of within that world of Satanism that they're supposed to show their Satanism? They're supposed to declare it in obtuse but interpretable ways. Is that in that culture? Do you know?
Yeah, I mean, they have to. The thing about the devil gaining your soul is the fact that you have to give him permission, right? So you could look at predictive programming in film. Like I remember I met this guy, a pretty famous comedian. He came down to my office in San Diego when I was doing social media, and he said, "Hey, I got this book. I want you to help me out with it." I said, "What's the book?" He said, "It's about zombies." And I said, "No, thanks. No one's buying a book about zombies." And then for about 2 hours, he convinced me he said, "Listen, I'm in Hollywood, and the next 20 years of films are about dystopia and zombies." And I said, "Really? How can you prove that?" And about a month later, I saw 3 commercials for 3 zombie movies coming out. And I was like, you know what? Let's talk about this promotion. And there's a whole pipeline of 20 years. So what they're doing is they're programming into the mind for you to accept a dystopian society, a dystopian reality. And that's how Satanism works. So they'll get you to like, look how often Jesus Christ is used as a derogatory phrase in film. They don't have to use that word, but they do. And they use it to attack Christ.
My dad used it enough that I thought that was my name. So
no, I get that. Yeah, I grew up in the same manner. Yeah, I thought I was him for a while, for sure.
The other one was, goddamn it, he was my brother.
Right.
This dystopia, again, that's the fictionalizing reality, right? That's the brainwashing. And so, Born Identities, MKUltra, and there's just more and more. Every time there's one of these things that starts to become real, they put out a movie that then fictionalizes it.
Well, here's the movie behind the real story of child trafficking pedophilia is Monsters, Inc.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Right? You steal the fear of the child.
Monsters, Inc.
But that's the whole purpose. So when I started going down that rabbit hole, the thing that I started to realize was these people aren't actually attracted to the child. They're attracted to the earthly power that the demons give them by stealing innocence.
That's what Satanism is. And anyone listening to this who's going, these 2 guys are nuts. What you have to do is you have to understand it is that Satanism is a religion.
It's the fastest growing religion in North America, in all 3 countries of North America.
Who keeps track of this shit?
Oh, all kinds of data sources. Yeah, they look at like the amount of. I keep track of like how many people get baptized in my church, and I give it to my podcast, and I hear back from them, so I can tell you how many people are being baptized. There is baptism by water and baptism by fire.
So I know an awful lot of people. Take for example Naomi Wolf, who talk about mutating from one form to another fast. She went from being a left-wing, putty-headed liberal with limousine liberal elite and all this stuff to a gun-toting, right-wing, MAGA-supporting, religious fanatic.
She went from San Francisco to Texas real fast.
That's right. Married a special forces guy, right? Yep. This is not what she would have imagined 10 years ago. And I hear way more people than ever before going from what we'll call sort of standard modern person to a person who supports the idea of good versus evil.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I don't think you have to take on Christianity to take on that belief.
Oh, no, not at all. It's pretty obvious today. It's very obvious today that we are living in a world, even the Bible says that we're born into this world of duality. God created evil and good. If without evil, you wouldn't know what good was.
Right.
There's always going to be evil because if every day was dark, you would never know what the sun looked like.
Well, also, even if there's no God, there's going to be evil.
Of course.
We know that too, right?
Of course. Yeah, that's human nature. Well, even the Bible says that our hearts are sinful and evil. Give your hearts to God. Do not. But yet Disney tells you follow your heart.
Well, Disney, talk about corrupt.
Oh yeah.
Right. The whole 33rd degree Masons, Walt Disney. Oh my God.
Lodge 33, right there in the middle.
Lodge 33, right in the middle.
Yep.
Right.
I was just in Palm Beach and I see these people driving around.
The guy at Nickelodeon gets convicted of pedophilia and then Disney hires him. It just makes no sense.
Oh yeah. Well, and their screening room meetings are now recorded. So when they're in the writing room, there are literally coaches in the room telling the writers, well, guys, we need to make this more woke. Guys, we need to have more transgender included. They're being guided from the top to make this material to get children to accept things that are clearly evil if you believe in evil or demonic if you believe in demonic. So the child trafficking thing has nothing to do actually with children. It's about stealing innocence. Because whether you believe in God or the devil, they do.
So as I understand it, that the goal is to hurt God.
Yes.
And that the closest thing to God is a child.
That's correct.
Right.
That's absolutely correct. Yeah, I mean,
this, by the way, this is coming from the mouth of a guy who I don't have a name for myself now, but I used to call myself an atheist. And what rattled me off of that path, because I had this image of the Middle Ages and scientists getting massacred because they believed that the Earth was at the center of the solar system and stuff like that. When I started reading about the Middle Ages, I go, wait a minute, that story is really not correct completely. For starters, the church had no problem with some guy saying, look, here's what's really going on. And they would just say, oh yeah, God's even more powerful than we thought. That was the end of that. So there were punk ass types who could not resist throwing it in the face of the church, and they got in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
But the church also protected peasants from nobles.
Mm-hmm.
Said, look, this is what hell looks like. If you keep doing this, you're going there. So behave yourself, that sort of thing. And of course, various popes and stuff did very bad things because
Mm-hmm.
they're humans. But now I'm a person who is not interested in practicing religion, but deeply understands the benefits that I have enjoyed because of the Judeo-Christian ethic.
Well, yeah, I met a guy just like you a while back, and he said, you know what, no matter what, the words of Jesus Christ are a pretty smart way to live, right? He said, I don't believe.
That's exactly right. And the idea of getting together every Sunday and sitting together and having some guy tell you about why you shouldn't be banging your neighbor's wife, it's not a terrible message, right?
That's right. That's right. Well, that's why I love the writings of Martin Luther. And Martin Luther was excommunicated from the church because he said, a church is a building, the Bible's a book, it's all about your relationship with God. And when you kind of realize that, you start to realize that, oh, the building is used to corral us, and the book may be used to control you, but freedom is found in your personal relationship. So I do a lot of ministry stuff.
You're going to convert me. I'm going to go get a cross after this.
Good. I love to hear that. But that's all it's about, pray, talk to God, because we live in these times where we're talking about dark stuff here today, and it's not even. This is, for anyone watching this is surface level.
Not the darkest.
No, I mean, I'm trying to stay on YouTube right now. So when they finally kick me off, it's going to go bananas. And I'd go to Rumble, Dave. I would go to Rumble right now if it wasn't so annoying for the end user. So when I put this video on Rumble,
how to watch Rumble without being annoyed?
Yeah, you pay for it.
No, you watch it through Brave.
Oh, really?
Brave cuts out the commercials.
Really?
You want to test run how good it is? Go to a porn site. Wipes out the commercials.
I'm not going to do that.
Oh, come on.
Swore off it years ago, man. Every man has been there. I admit to being there, but swore off it years ago. Every man has been there.
Like that. I'm the only guy who has the chutzpah to tell a preacher to go to a porn site. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm not a preacher, but yeah.
But no, if you watch, and I hesitate to say this because what I don't know, when you put it up on Rumble and they're bombarding your podcast with commercials, are you getting paid?
Yeah. Well, so I don't know if I'm getting paid for
it. You've been watching that filters the commercials. Is that costing you money?
I don't even. I have a money in YouTube and Rumble. I've never touched it. I actually don't want I don't need or want their money.
Right, so. but let's say you do need it. Let's say you're the guy who's just trying to put food on the table. Does Brave's commercial filter take the money out of the pocket of the content creator?
It's interesting to find out. That's a good experiment.
Yeah, I'd love to know. I'd love you to tell me, because if it doesn't, I'm a big fan of digital media. So one day, here, these are just funny stories, funny anecdotes. One day I'm having a chat. I'm out there trying to solve my Microsoft Outlook email problem. And next thing I know, I'm swapping email tweets back and forth with Steve Sinofsky. Now, Steve Sinofsky was the president of Microsoft below Steve Ballmer.
Yep.
And I'm getting help from Steve on my email program. And then at one point he says, "Do you have a Mac or a PC sort of equivalent or whatever?" And I said, "A Mac." He says, "I'm lost." And one day I said to him, I said, they changed the menu again. And he said, "Yeah, I thought they locked it down. I'm as lost as you are now," right? So he's
the number two of the company.
I needed a spam filter for Firefox.
Oh, wow.
And then
Just Firefox.
Brendan Ike, who I've had chats with, and Brendan and I swap DMs all the time. And he tells me about spam filter. Now, you don't just go to the internet and drop a spam filter, right? I mean, that you're asking for trouble doing that.
Oh, yeah.
And he says, this one works. He says, but you ought to try Brave, too. And it turns out he wrote Brave. Also.
Really?
Yeah.
He wrote Brave?
He wrote Brave.
I did not know that.
Brendan's very outspoken, by the way. If you're not following Brendan, you're missing an opportunity. Brendan Ike, he is a
I will follow him.
World leader. He's kind of soft-spoken in his own way, but not in other ways. He should be on Rogan. I mean, he's done Lex Friedman, but he should be on Rogan, and he's super smart for a guy who writes JavaScript, creates Mozilla, creates Brave.
Well, he just had Andreessen on there. And he just had Andreessen on there. That guy's about as nerdy as they come. And Andreessen's show was amazing.
Was that a great podcast, though? Holy moly.
Very good.
Riveting 4 hours. Andreessen had to know he was starting a firestorm.
Sure, of course. I think he wanted to.
Yeah. And then that was followed a couple podcasts later by, why am I forgetting this? He brought on someone else who lit the match again.
Well, he was late to the game. I told people in 2021, it was a matter of months before financial censorship began. And about 6 months after, I mean, all you have to do is study communism. That's what literally just study communism, look at their playbook. You knew when they got back into full power, all three pillars of power, that financial censorship was coming. And it still may come.
I started to read. I realized that that you couldn't understand geopolitics without understanding authoritarianism.
That's right. It's the baseline.
So I started reading Hannah Arendt and Live Not by Lies and
great book.
And what's the Psychology of Totalitarianism by Matthias Desmet and books like that.
Yeah.
And then you go, holy moly, we are really up against dark forces here.
And you start with the Communist Manifesto, Chapter 1, central bank, full control over money. It's all they have laid out, because most communists are either very subversive atheists or they're very devout Satanists, like at their core. And that's the thing people don't understand, is Satanism is a practiced religion. It's a ritualistic, very heavily practiced religion. I did not know that
until a handful of years ago.
Neither did I. I thought it was just a myth.
I've been digging deep and hard, although I had to take some breaks because it was wearing me down. But I went through all those websites that have all that darkness in it, and documentaries on the history of Moloch and crap like that, and documentaries, and watching interviews of people like Annika Lucas and Kathy O'Brien and victims of trafficking. And there's a site called 50 Voices where they sort of ask each of 50 victims the same questions, and they describe their experience.
It's shocking.
You can hear in it, some of them are clearly MKUltra, clearly being groomed for some military purpose. Some are just flat out being jammed into pedophile networks, which it's unclear what their role is specifically.
It's called leverage.
They're all very convincing.
Yeah, the pedophile networks are blackmail leverage, right? I mean, if you know that about someone, they're going to do anything you want them to do.
But it's also about the Satanism too.
Of course, yeah. Stealing of only those as innocent as a child shall enter the gates of heaven. That line is exactly what those networks are about: stealing the innocence of a child, so less people go to heaven. We're gonna go to MKUltra on Kamala Harris in just a second, but before that, I'm gonna give you a movie to watch this week or this weekend with your wife. The movie is called Nefarious, and it's from 2023. So there's two Nefarious. I think one's from 2020. The other one's 2023. I met the makers of the film. I've had a meeting with them. Phenomenal guys. The research they did on demonic possession before that movie was unreal.
Where do I find this?
Amazon Prime, I think, is the easiest place. So the film is, this guy is...
Doesn't drive my wife nuts. Chicks don't like this darkness.
It's not really that dark. It's a psychological thriller, so it takes place in a jail. There's not even another setting. It's just a jail, different parts of a jail. So a guy's on death row. He claims insanity. They bring in a shrink to see if he's insane or not. And he says, I want you to declare me sane so that I can get out of this body. Like, this guy served his purpose with me. I'm a demon. But he explains two things. So you talk about Moloch history. He explains the guy's having an abortion. I won't ruin the scene for you, but he explains the ancient practice of abortion, which used to be have the baby and then sacrifice the baby on these steel hands of the statue of Moloch, would have fires lit underneath them.
How long ago would this be? What century?
This would be, well, it would be multiple centuries. So this is certainly the 300 years before Christ, where idol worship was paramount. The Canaanite era, the Phoenicians. You can run through all the way. I mean, this has never really ended. It just used to be widely practiced right before and about 500 years after Christ.
So here's my hunch. So I intend to write about this. I'm not sure it's a good idea. I actually that conversation I had the other day.
Write about it and send it to me.
I worry that I'm reading the room wrong, and that I watch someone like, Liz Crocken, right? And she says all this stuff, and you go, she's not getting killed, right? But I'm worried I don't understand the roles of all the players.
I think we all have that worry.
And I'm worried that it's like, oh, but Liz is our limited hangout. We can't have this guy Cornell doing this. Something like that. I just worry.
Sure.
I don't know where I was going with that. So Nefarious, the movie, Amazon Prime, 2023.
And he gives you a great description of Earth. At one time, we were in heaven with God. Then we rebelled against God. He cast us here. He gave Lucifer dominion, their master. They serve Lucifer. And the entire purpose of it's almost like there's Earth, heaven, and hell. And we live here. And God created us in his beautiful image. So those below will try to destroy those on the surface to hurt those above. And that is like literally a synopsis of human nature, human life, and its existence. But it also talks about how a demon would subjugate a human body and gives the exact levels of subjugation, which are all kind of provable when you look at like deliverance exercise.
Does the movie have an explicit religious connotation, or is that the subtext?
It's a subtext.
Okay.
So it's primarily a psychological thriller about whether or not a serial killer should be executed that day or not. That's the whole movie. But when you get into it, I think you'll find it fascinating for where you are in this area of research. I think you'll find it very useful in understanding a lot of the darkness of the world. And it'll bring you closer to God when you realize how real the devil is. It absolutely does.
Some guy sent me an email, said, if you give me a chance, I promise you I can convince you the Earth's flat. And I said, no, I'm not giving you the chance because A, I don't want to waste my time, and B, I don't want you to convince me. You'll ruin my life if you convince me the Earth's flat.
I've had the same conversation for years. I say, listen, I don't care if it's round or flat, it's screwed. Okay. So until it's unscrewed, I don't care what shape it is. It matters not to my existence. I do understand a big
related sort of logic is I don't care if Obama was born in Kenya or the United States. The question is, who was he and what did he do?
And what was the purpose of him being there? How did he win? How did an unknown loser, right? Like I really never.
That gets to the point that the presidents are all being ushered up some change. So, for example, a guy who did really well this year, but who I don't trust, but he was great for the purpose he played was J.D. Vance.
Yeah,
J.D. Vance is exactly what Trump needed. At first, I didn't like the appointment. But then I watched him and I go, and I'd read Hillbilly Elegy before Vance was a famous guy.
Yeah.
And we watched the movie and things like that. And I'd read
it's a good movie.
But his origin story is a little too perfect for me.
Yeah. Now, well, I can counteract that by saying I know
someone back at Harvard or whatever and got moved forward. There's a guy who's being moved forward right now who started at Cornell. And you'll see him in the public spotlight at some point, in my opinion. It's a guy named Savante Myrick. And I think he's right now going through various nonprofit organizations doing things. It's resume boost, right? They build a resume. I'll tell you whose resume is totally fake is Lena Wen from the COVID vaccine story. Her resume is totally fake.
Completely, yeah.
Completely fake. I read her papers.
Bill Gates' resume is fake.
Well, Bill Gates almost doesn't have one, right?
That's right.
Except for his, mom and dad being in positions of power and things like that. But
yeah, most people don't know his dad started Planned Parenthood.
Soros right now.
Oh boy, well, you're already going down the darkness. You don't even need Nefarious for that.
Oh, I know.
I met a guy in Palm Beach the other day, an investor, and he's like, "Listen, I'm going to make this it's a great introduction for our fund." He's like, "Hey, I'd love to introduce you to this guy. Tell me about him." He tells me about him. He goes, "Oh yeah, this fund he's backed by George Soros." And I was like, "No, it's okay.
I'm out.
It's okay.
I'm out. I'm good to go." Soros's goal, I believe, is to destroy the United States.
It documented 100% of his life has been dedicated to destroying the West, especially the United States.
Right. And I'm trying to understand if there's method to his madness or if it's just madness.
It's He definitely has a method, in my opinion. I've followed Soros
Well,
for about 15 years.
in my digging into World War II, I found myself asking a rhetorical question. And that is, so you got the Holocaust. And the question is not whether Hitler was a madman, whether he was a psychopath and things like that, and killing all these people was horrible. The question is, was there a tactical reason for the Holocaust? And you can start with, well, you know, common foe unifying the country. That doesn't hold water to me because I think it was done sort of off radar. I don't think the German people would have signed off at that level of I think it was kind of offsite. And there's all these theories as to why he would pull off the Holocaust. And then I got to the final question, was since sort of in a creature from Jekyll Island sort of logic, the mega bankers funded the start of and continuation of the Soviet Union, the Russian Revolution, the Soviet Union.
100%.
Is it possible that Hitler was trying to kill off the financial power structure behind the Soviets?
Well, I would. So there's about 7 different revisionist stories of World War II, and they're difficult to keep on YouTube, right? So you talk about the Holocaust. In 1988, they adjusted Auschwitz from 4 million to 1 million dead. That's a historical fact. So we know 6 million didn't die already because historians revised Auschwitz from 4 million to 1 million. There were only 350 to 550,000 Jews in Germany. And you can go on ChatGPT and look that up. You could look at what Hitler did when he took power. And the first thing that he did was he started rounding up communists. And about 90% of the communists in his country were Jewish.
Right.
And you could look at typhoid, how it broke out throughout the entire region, how after England dropped phosphorus bombs 2 weeks after surrendering, all those people in camps were malnutrition because there were no supply lines. They bombed everything with phosphorus bombs after they surrendered. You can look at a revisionist version of history, which I think is probably pretty accurate, that we never discovered any of the concentration camps. The Bolsheviks did. And if you believe anything the Bolsheviks say, you haven't studied history.
Well, one of the things that I've found in my deep dive.
I'm trying to keep this one on YouTube, Dave. I'm trying. This is stuff that got me kicked off.
One of the things that Diana West talks about is the fact that every time a U.S. soldier found himself in Russian territory, he got sent to a gulag. This is not what allies do, right?
That's right.
And so at the end of the war, the official narrative was, which, by the way, the official narratives in World War II are horrifically incorrect, right?
Completely incorrect.
Completely incorrect. But the official narrative was there's maybe a dozen or 2 U.S. soldiers that were in Russian territory that are missing. The number's estimated to be 15 to 20,000, 25,000.
Yeah, I've heard 15 to 25.
Yeah. And we literally just left them there.
Yeah. Well, you look at General Patton. General Patton said in his diary, we fought the wrong people.
Yeah. And
7 days later, he died on base in an accident.
Yeah, I know.
When look at Eisenhower, what he did afterward, right? He came out and said they were shrinking their heads and making lamps of them. Both of those theories have been proven wrong over and over again. Even the gas chambers have significant revisionist history. I'm trying to keep this on YouTube. I have my own.
Don't go any deeper because I also don't want to end up some guy ripping my face off for getting in a Holocaust denier mode. But what is true though is that whoever writes history is certainly going to embellish it, no matter what.
And make themselves more of a victim and more of a victor.
Here's what I'll tell you is we don't know at all what happened on October 7th. We don't know. I'm sure things happened. The facts, though, are long since smothered by the fog of war.
Oh, sure. I mean, so just look at the border of Israel. That is the strongest border in the history of the world.
That woman,
Efrickson, yes.
Yeah.
So the Israelis have technology that could literally look in through my curtains in my house and listen to me talk from Israel, but they couldn't detect guys on motorcycles and hang gliders. They just shockingly appeared. Now, I'm sure they came in and killed people, but we also know.
Efrickson's got ovaries that are this big for telling the story she tells.
I completely agree. But and I've told similar story because it's just logical thinking. Well,
I've also told her that she's unbelievably gutsy. I mean, I've made sure that she knows that you can see it. But
we just look at things ideologically, right? I have a podcast right now in the hopper that I've been holding for 2 months because if I release it right now with my position at YouTube, I'm gone. And Rumble, man.
It's released on Rumble.
I'm probably going to at some point, but I think I'm going to reshoot it with a guest because it's a little too
important.
it needs to be structured the way that it's designed, because all the mayhem that's happening in the Middle East right now is being supported by let's look at Syria. The Syrian rebels. I just interviewed Patrick Henningsen. The Syrian rebels are, Patrick's great. They are ISIS and Al Qaeda. These are mercenaries from ISIS and Al Qaeda that are the Syrian refugees. There are pictures already showing of Israeli soldiers in Damascus in Assad's office taking pictures, making fun of Assad. This is Israel grabbing land throughout the region, as they planned to do under Netanyahu in the 1990s and early 2000s. He said he was going to do this at some point.
Did you see that 2002 video that he said turn off the cameras and they didn't?
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Oh, he's a horrible, horrible human being. But they use that. And of course, if you say anything about Israel, they'll just say, well, 6 million Jews died in the Holocaust. How could you say anything about that? And that is the instant. If you question Israel, you're an anti-Semite. You're an anti-Semite right away. Even though I have Jewish friends, I'm an anti-Semite because I question a narrative.
I got into it with a guy who really was militant along those lines. And I kept trying to, in a very calm way, I said, look, I don't support what Biden's doing. And as a consequence, I got to be able to criticize him.
Absolutely.
And he kept coming at this anti-Semite argument where I'm going, look, you got to be able to oppose the actions of a government, because governments are bad generally. And
yes.
And he kept saying, no, Jews are Israel Jews. I go, no, they're not. That's just not true. And I tried to keep it calm. And I said, you can't, for example, blame Joe Sixpack for thinking something bad about what's going on in the Gaza Strip. And I've tried to stay neutral on the what's right and wrong, because to understand what's right and wrong, you have to understand what the whole purpose of everything is, and I don't. But it's certainly horrific. I get that, but that's horrific. A lot of things are horrific. Doesn't mean they're right or wrong. It's just they're horrific. They're humans battling humans. And I said, you can't blame Joe Sixpack for drawing a conclusion that he's watching the news on CNN or whatever, and he's not an anti-Semite because he's watching what's going on and says that's bad, right? And he just was ripping. He was ripping. He got madder and madder. And I was on a Signal chat with him. This guy supposes he's a deep state cyber expert, and I'm trying to figure out if he's a grandiose narcissist instead.
Sure.
And I finally hung up on the guy. I said, I can't take this anymore.
Yeah, you got to look at things objectively. I always tell people, I go, nation A is doing X to nation B. Is nation A correct? Oh, no, that's horrific. I'm like, well, nation A is Israel. And they're like, but that's God's chosen people.
Yeah, I know. Well, right. So I've written fairly militantly supporting Putin.
Yeah.
And I think that NATO wanted the Ukrainian war. NATO instigated the Ukrainian war. Putin played the best hand he had. And I think that Putin is arguably the most grounded world leader.
I would agree with that. I would agree. And Assad, really study Assad.
Yeah,
Assad was
I wrote a ton about the white helmets and the fake gas attacks under Obama. They kept trying to pretend Assad was doing horrible things. I go, none of this makes sense. None of it makes sense. So one time I'm watching a Scott Horton podcast. You know Scott?
Yeah. Well, I don't know him, but I know his podcast. Yeah.
And I'm going, oh, this guy is really good. I should go find some more of his.
He is good.
And I found a podcast that he did with me. I go, wait a minute. I don't remember doing that. And it was when I called out the Skripal poisonings was bullshit. So the Skripal poisonings were crap from head to toe.
Oh yeah. And
as an organic chemist, and I actually, they said it's uniquely Russian technology, the Novichok. I said, it's a simple molecule. So then I put it on my organic chemistry final exam. Said, how do you make this molecule? And then some blogger said, I had them make it. I go, no. I haven't designed the synthesis. They didn't make it, for Christ's sake. And but the whole Skripal story was baloney.
Yeah.
And next thing I know, I'm on George Galloway's show a couple times a week, and Al Jazeera's ringing my phone off the hook and stuff like that. But I was the only organic chemist calling out the garbage.
Yeah.
Because of uniquely Russian technology, I said, I can make it in 3 steps from earth, fire, and water. This is trivial. I might die on that last step. It
was uniquely Russian, though, but you shouldn't question that.
And then when one of the Ruskies was challenged, they said, well, you said uniquely Russian. He was supposedly the effect or whatever that is. And he said,
that's common code for spy.
and then they said, yeah, exactly. It turns out I found out my grandfather was CIA. And then they said, but the structure was in your book. And then he says, well, I don't know if they have my book. And I go, oh, come on here. This is just getting nuttier than hell. So in any event, they're just faking everything. So in any event, Scott Horton, who is a tough hombre. Did you see the Zero Hedge debate with Neil Ferguson?
I did not, no.
Oh, he did a debate with Neil Ferguson. And Ferguson's kind of a neocon, as they say.
Yes.
And a scholarly one, but still, they often are. And Horton was brutally ripping the hell out of Ferguson. Now, I think he was owning Ferguson on the facts, but he was ripping Ferguson in a way that was like, it was like a, angry shouting match sort of level, angry.
I'm gonna have to find this now.
Yeah, you got to find this. Zero Hedge debate to us. It was it's put on by, these were all put on by a guy named Liam Cosgrove. I did one on climate change with Steve Keen, a Zero Hedge debate, and they put them on, and this one was good, but it got too cantankerous. It was sort of unproductive levels of anxiety produced by Scott. But Scott's brilliant. Scott really knows a ton.
Oh, sure.
But so I read his book, but I do audio, and I've read tons of books on the region, and it's not sticky.
No.
I realized I just can't understand the Middle East. Then I go, wait a minute, Dave. Nobody can.
That's the purpose. The purpose of the Middle East is to keep it unstable and unsticky.
And that's right. Any country that gets stable, we bomb.
Yeah, that's right. Or any country that rejects a central bank. Hitler rejected a central bank. Gaddafi, Assad, Hussein, now Putin. They're all attacked.
Oh, by the way, there were popping African dictators when they rejected the vaccine, too. They knocked out 5 African leaders.
Was it 5? I thought it was 3. There's 5?
I thought it was 5. I could be remembering wrong.
More than one is enough.
We're just debating, sort of.
Right. Right.
Yeah, but these guys said, we're not vaccinated. They said, well, you're not leading then either.
Well, we got to go to, you were on somebody else's podcast off camera, and you started talking about Kamala Harris and MK, and you're just going down the MK podcast, and I'll shore up the rabbit hole. So I'll shore up the rabbit hole. MKUltra began in Bolshevik Russia as a way to control the entire population of a communist nation. Our politicians loved it, so they decided to bring it to America in the late 20s, early 30s, made it into an official program, MKUltra, a mind control program. They use every drug in this program with the exception of cannabis, which is pretty odd. Every other drug is administered. Fear is administered. It's a way of controlling people. Then you had Dr. Delgado, who started embedding electronics in brains. He could control a bull with a remote control.
Torture, LSD, you name it, right?
Crazy stuff. And then they finally had, then the news got out. I think the New York Post broke a story about it in the late 40s. So by the early 50s, they banned now they didn't ban human mind control. They banned the MKUltra program.
It means it went behind the closed doors, and was it Jolly West ran it, as I recall.
Jolly West, yep. And then you move into like there's 17 or 18.
What's the other name of the guy who's the same name as a COVID vax guy? Gottlieb.
Yeah, Gottlieb came into it. So you have this whole, literally since the 1915 era of Bolshevik.
I didn't know it that far back. That's news to me.
Yeah, it's Russian. It's of Russian origin. So we actually brought in some scientists and created the MK. But now it's under a different name. But it has 400 times the amount of funding that it had in the 30s.
We also brought in all the German bizarro doctors who did all the studies in Germany in the camps.
We imported
a bunch of those, possibly even Mengele.
Possibly with Operation Paperclip, but you also have to look at the camps themselves. They had areas to do plays, they had libraries, they had cafes, they had kitchens, they had schools. So the story of those camps is told by the Bolsheviks. But now we did bring over Russian or German assets after World War II.
Right.
One of which was Wernher von Braun, who created NASA. The word NASA in Hebrew means deceive. And NASA by itself, that's fact. The word Hamas in Hebrew means violence. It's true. Like, you can look at ancient Hebrew. NASA means to deceive. Hamas means violence. So Wernher von Braun goes through his whole life. We just talked about Stanley Kubrick and how in his will he said, I filmed the moon landing in 1969. Now, Wernher von Braun on his gravestone, it says Psalm 19:1. Psalm 19:1 is don't quote me on this, but in King James, it's, and the firmament sheweth God's glory in the sky. So why would the guy who went to the moon put on his gravestone Psalm 19:1, and the firmament sheweth God's glory in the sky? Meaning there's a firmament, there is a God, and we probably didn't go to the moon in 1969. Not to say we haven't been there, because I don't want to go down that way in this episode.
Dug into the moon landing story, and one guy said, look, I don't like a lot of these conspiracy theories, but I dug into that one, and that one holds up pretty good.
Yes, it does.
And then one day I got like a 3-hour documentary, and I said, I'm not going to take the time, but I sent it to my brother, and he said, it's very convincing.
Yep.
And so, I'm holding judgment on that one still, only because I just, one time Glenn Greenwald was asked about 9/11, and his answer was, you can only fight so many fights.
That's right. Oh, no. I get, yeah, I'm not trying to be, I am a conspiracy theorist, but I deal with like the facts of the situations. I don't go into why. Yeah.
The title of my year in review is What is a Fact?
Well, the thing I actually just said this in Palm Beach. We were, I was at my friend's house and we were looking at the moon through a telescope. And some guy, one of his friends was over and he was like, well, did we actually go there? And I said, well, maybe, because we definitely went there. Who filmed the guy getting out of the shuttle? Like, it's just kind of over with. Who was the guy holding the camera when we took one small step for man and one large step for humanity? Who was that guy? There had to have been a camera on the moon to film the shuttle landing and the guy stepping out. There had to have already been a camera there.
Was it far enough away that it wasn't attached to the shuttle?
Yes. You could see the full shuttle. Those little pods are very small. Very small.
Well, then there's the other possibility that they actually snuck out there, put the camera out, and then had them go back in and then do the...
Certainly a possibility, but not a star in the sky. There was not a star in the sky. No stars. Completely black.
You see those on the moon, that's for sure.
Yeah. Well, we'll go through that in a different episode. I want to get into MKUltra, Kamala Harris, what you heard.
So Kamala Harris is obviously an entertaining personality.
In the wrong direction, yeah.
Yeah. It's amazing ability to say bizarre things. She has personalities that show up differently. At the same time, I had debates early on. I said she's really stupid. My brother said, I'm not sure she's stupid, that sort of thing. She then did that teleprompter-based presentation where her teleprompter went off, and she couldn't handle it at all. And she acted like a robot that short-circuited her just doing this. She kept repeating 32, 32, 32. And that was pretty weird. And so then I'm watching Candace Owens do an origin story deep dive. And at first I thought it was she's not black. And I'm going, why are you burning political capital on this story? Because she's a woman of color. I don't care if she's black. She lied about it. And I go, oh, they all lie. That's not one of the bigger lies in this world.
Like, how do you think she got to where she is? Yeah.
Yeah, right. But I'd also seen like a guy who's a prosecutor who says, I've been digging deep and I can't find a single case that Kamala actually tried. I can't find it in the records of her district and things like that. So it starts getting into the fake resume story, that sort of thing. Candace Owens starts going deeper and she starts looking at her biological, her lineage and stuff. And next thing you know, she's pointing to some person who she's there with and her uncle. And she says, that's not her uncle. And then she's with her aunt. She goes, that's not her aunt. And at one point, she ends up doing a podcast with Alex Jones. And Alex Jones says, this sounds like MKUltra. And she says, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So then you find out there's sort of data surfacing that her mother was not this sweet person who blah, 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 blah. And she's got a father who's who's a Marxist. And they're just, her mother had a position at McGill of all universities.
That's right.
Holy friggin' moly, right? Your audience may know, but that's where the CIA ran their MKUltra program out of.
Yep.
And so the plot's thickening pretty quickly here. And then what happens is I'm in a podcast with Jim Kunstler, and he mentions having a day or two earlier interviewed a woman named Elizabeth Nixon, spelled Nikson.
Mm-hmm.
And I've read a ton about this shit about MKUltra and split personalities and stuff. So I was ready for this. And so Elizabeth Nixon was former head of the European Bureau of Time magazine or something. She was not a trivial person in the world.
No, she's a player. Yeah.
She's a player. She often in this podcast starts talking about how she discovered that her mother was a victim of MKUltra. And Jim's telling me this story on this podcast with someone else. I think it was Mike Ferris. And And he said she was in an asylum in Canada. I said, yeah, with McGill University. And Jim sort of flinched. How'd you know that? And I go, because that's where all this crap was happening, right?
That's 100% right.
And then she starts talking about Kamala, and she says Kamala has all the credit. So Nixon took off 3 years of her job, of her life, to study MKUltra because her mother was a victim of it. And she says Kamala has all the personality traits of an MKUltra victim. And then you start looking at her background. You go, okay, where did she come from? It's all vague.
Very vague.
You find out her mother was an authoritarian, not this sweetheart.
Mm-hmm.
She all of a sudden is 1 minute she's dating Montel Williams, which sounds kind of P. Diddy-ish, right?
Very weird.
Montel certainly knew P. Diddy, and therefore by proxy, Kamala is pretty damn close to P. Diddy.
Yep.
And then she's climbing up the ladder first by humping a politician. Boy, that's MKUltra, pedophile network, you name it.
Sex slave control.
Yeah, sex slave stuff. And then he creates her career for her. And next thing you know, she's a prosecutor without leaving a paper trail of who she prosecuted. I'm not convinced she passed the bar, for example. Although I said on Twitter one day, I'm pretty convinced that she could not pass any bar. And so then,
especially not with her last speech.
Then she
sounded hammered.
Speech, but I for years watching her, I go, who's writing her speeches for her? Because they're nonsense.
It was Norm from Cheers. Norm was writing them for her. Right there with a beer.
Right. But they were nonsense. I go, okay, so Kamala does have a brain, but her speechwriter's supposed to have but apparently she had a huge attrition out of her team, like 92% had quit, stuff like that. So there was something wrong. And then she does that last speech where it looks like someone sent her through a tumble dry cycle before the speech. Some people said she looked intoxicated, but through her campaign, she'd go from Jamaican to articulate to Southern.
Yeah.
And I thought, I thought the media was not giving her enough credit for being a playful person. So she always struck me as like she'd be fun to hang around with because she's always clowning around, and then she says, "Oh, we should cut that clip," and they don't. That's right. But that last thing said someone filmed her, someone signed off on her doing it, and someone posted that.
Yeah, all got approved.
Suicidal. That was a politically suicidal presentation, and then she's lost the election. And her loving husband, who's supposedly banging nannies and punching them out and stuff like that, he's sketchy. Not to mention her running mate, who's got all sorts of sketchy shit, including strong ties with China and questionable affiliations with young boys and things like that. So the whole program is a mess. But then all of a sudden, Emhoff, her husband, says they're separating.
Yeah, right after the election.
He basically just said, your work here is done. Now you get to leave. And so he said, okay, we're separating, and he goes.
Well, the weird thing is that one of my wife's friends, who I won't name on the show, was a very prominent hairdresser in Los Angeles, and her boss of her salon. Now, these hairdressers, people think it's a hairdresser. In LA, these are pretty powerful people. All these famous people come to the salon, they spill the beans. Oh, yeah, they hear it all. One of them was there when Harris was introduced to Emhoff. And it was like a business meeting.
How long ago was that? How long ago?
A year, almost a year before their marriage, whatever year that was.
No, when was that?
I don't even know. I just heard this from her maybe like 3 months ago.
They get married, and then she started moving up the political ranks.
No, she was already AG. I think she was already AG when she married Emhoff.
Okay, but that could have been she needs a white husband to be the perfect Manchurian candidate.
Which is hilarious because she promotes separation and racism, right? Like she hates white people when she's married. But Emhoff isn't like white per se. He's Jewish, right? So that you could call that white if you like. But
he's not black. Let's go there.
He's not black. Yeah, he's not black.
And so all of a sudden, weeks after the election, he dumps her, and I go, even if there was stresses and this and that, you'd think they'd say, look, let's just wait till it all dies down.
Let's go to January. Let your career pass by.
Let's wait till no one cares.
Right.
But somehow, did you ever see the movie or the TV series where a fully Americanized couple of Russian spies?
The Americans.
The Americans.
Yeah.
And the guy starts liking the U.S. and the woman, his wife, realized she has a problem emerging because her husband's starting to adapt, things like that. So
one of my favorite shows. FX had some good
another one I
shows.
hope would come back is the what's this sci-fi one? The Three Body Problem.
Oh yeah, no, also a good show.
The first series was so good, and there was no punchline. But I'm going, oh, please bring back another season of that show.
No,
And
but it was,
the universe winks,
but it was good, and it was enlightening, and it was intelligent.
and it cost
None,
135 million for the first season.
but none of that. They don't want you to be intelligent, enlightened, or thinking for yourself. So that program's not
Well,
going
the other thing is, so we're hearing about how CNN's got this big shakeout going, and they're going to spin off MSNBC, but they're going to spin them off without any money. So they're basically going to be an unfunded network, which means they're basically being euthanized, right?
Yep.
Rachel Maddow gone, right? Various players gone. They're just getting rid of them. And they think, well, how do you get rid of Rachel Maddow? I go, she's going. Chris Cuomo left, right? She doesn't serve a purpose now because no one trusts her. Now,
Right.
The idea that this is a profit motive is nuts.
Yeah.
This is chump change for the deep state. If they're stealing 14 trillion from the Pentagon, they can afford to pay the bills of these networks.
Absolutely.
And so what it is they need them to have viewers because they need their propaganda to get dissipated, to get propagated.
Of course. Yeah, you've got to wash it clean, a whole new group of people, a whole new lie behind their background.
By Rogan and by Greenwald and by Taibbi.
Mm-hmm.
And so now I predicted this, then about 2 days later saw it. They're going to start doing podcast-like news shows.
Yeah, Matt Gaetz just got one. Assad announced today. Assad said he's going to start a podcast.
They're interviewing people and making it look podcasty.
Right.
They'll make it look like two people. Like they did with Kamala and Tim Walz. The interview they did. Dana Bash, whose husband's a total spook.
Complete spook. Self-admitted spook. He's not hiding it either.
No, it's not hidden. It's like Victoria Nuland.
That's not her real name either.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
It's like Jack Ruby. Remember Jack Ruby's real name?
I don't remember his real name, but I know it's not his real name.
Jack Rubenstein.
Yeah. Well, Mark Cuban, same. They all have Jewish. He's a Russian Jew by nature, by genetics. So Cuban is more Americanized. So you wonder why Cuban looks like Rachel Maddow. It's probably because he's following the Talmud pretty closely.
One of the funniest memes on the planet when Elon posted it, and it was Maddow and Cuban both wearing the same glasses up. And Elon posted says, "These just look like a couple of old lesbians to me." I'm going, "Oh my god, that was good." Right? Oh.
There's so many good memes right now, though. Like even Trump on Time Magazine, the way they're using AI to make an actual picture come to life, or the Jill Biden looking at Trump and smiling the other day, like that meme was awesome. And Trump posted it.
The meme where Biden is talking to Obama, and he's telling Obama how he stuck it up his ass.
Yeah.
But the best, I think, was when Kamala calls Waltz and tells him she wants to pick him as a running mate.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So here's a question for you. Why are there no good memes coming from the left?
Well, number one, they're void of creativity, right? They're void of humor, which is required for a good meme, because you want to say something serious that makes you laugh, but makes you think. Like a good meme. You know where memes began? They actually started in the Roman Empire.
Dawkins.
No, Roman Empire. No one could read. So when they wanted to get information out, they would actually put pictures of what they wanted people to do. They would draw them. They would have people like painting them in the Roman Empire. The Germans use memes. Everyone's used memes. Memes aren't a new thing. They're just like cooler now.
Comes from Richard Dawkins.
The term, yes. Yeah. But the idea of a picture to illustrate an idea, it's a hieroglyph could be a meme, right? For all, that's, you could really say it was the same thing. But really, Romans would take these little square pieces of papyrus, and they would draw pictures on them with no words, because none of the Romans were allowed to read. But they had to give him instructions. It would be like a guy walking to the Colosseum, okay, I need to walk to the Colosseum tomorrow.
Interesting. But yeah, the left, and I swear if they came up with a clever meme about Trump, I'd appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely. I would be dying laughing if they did. But they're void of humor, because their entire purpose of the left is to become a victim. So when you're
victim
if you're a perpetual victim, then you have absolutely no sense of humor, because if you laugh at yourself, you're not a victim, right?
I hadn't even thought of that.
Right. So you can't make fun of yourself. You can't make fun of the other side, because you have the virtue.
You can't self-deprecate.
Absolutely not. And you certainly
someone else's fault.
And you can't make fun of the other side, because you're a virtue signaler. So what you're trying to do is stop memes, not fight in a meme war.
So,
because
so
that's
I
virtue.
actually tell my class their generation has no humor. And I said,
None.
the reason is because because every joke has a butt of the joke, and you guys don't think that's fair.
And that's actually the purpose of a good joke. That's what
To
makes a good
find the
joke.
butt, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
good joke. There's always going to be a victim. It might as well be you today, right?
I will say I'm taking my son, my 15-year-old son, and 3 of his friends to a concert right after this tonight. And I will say that that is different, maybe just in Texas, but these kids make me laugh. Like they are legitimately funny because they sound like us when we were kids. They sit down in the car and they just make fun of each other for like an hour on the way to the concert.
Oh, I know.
It's the
That's just
best.
guys talking, right?
Yeah,
So,
it's the
your
best.
best friends, you can make them rudest jokes to.
That's exactly right.
The other
And
interesting thing, if you watch chicks talk, they face each other. Guys sit parallel.
yeah,
You can picture you're sitting on the steps, you're both looking off at the street.
yep,
And that's because that's your way of saying, I trust you so much that I don't have to watch you.
that's right. I didn't think about that. That's pretty interesting.
Right.
I've got a good one. So my friend Jeff, when I was down in Palm Beach yesterday, I arrived. He just got a new place and he had 2 extra rooms. He didn't have a bed, so he went out. And, first of all, I'm 6'2", 200 pounds. He bought a twin bed for me, which my head and my feet hang off on both sides. And as a actual, this is what guys do. All the bedding was Harry Potter. He knows that I hate Harry Potter. He knows that it's stupid. And I'm a grown man. So he put me in all Harry Potter sheets and a blanket for the last 3 days. Like that's he's a conservative. We do fun things like that. Now, if you put that for
it's
a
like
liberal,
when I said to you earlier, you're smarter than you look, right?
yeah,
That's just,
yeah,
you're
that's the
right.
best compliment I've ever gotten.
I rode in a cab one day with a guy from New Jersey who grew up on the street talking the New Jersey trash talk.
Yeah,
Nothing came out of his mouth that wasn't sort of a scripted rip on something. And so at one point I sort of interjected and he says, oh, we got a comedian here. You know, I'm like,
yeah.
never mind. There's no way I can keep up with this guy.
I love New Yorkers in New Jersey just for that. Like a lot of my friends are New Yorkers, New Jersey, and like we have conversations. Well, when I would hang out with him when my kid was young, he was like, "You guys hate each other?" And I'm like, "Actually, I love that guy. Like you guys don't sound like it." I'm like, "That's what dudes sound like."
It's like watching military guys. They do it.
Yeah,
right.
they're
My wife's
ruthless.
watching a show right now, and they just rip each other nonstop. Right.
Well, I got to tell this funny joke. So I have a bunch of military friends. I have some friends that are online friends. I have friends in my real life. So 2 of my good friends that I grew up with, like 17, 18, I met them. They went in the military. They got it. One guy went in the Navy. One guy went in the Marines. They continually make fun of each other every time for the last 25 years. Now they're both out of the military. And every year they send each other the same stuff in a different box with a different card around Christmas time. So in the next week or 2, the guy in the Navy is going to get a dildo from the guy in the Marines. This happens every year. And the Marine is going to get a pack of crayons from the guy in the Navy. Because they call them crayon eaters. Like, oh, if you want your crayons eaten, eat a Marine, or like hey, if you want a man boy, hire a Navy man. So like that's kind of the, if we can get back to that masculine culture with men, I think you see a big change.
We're going to someday, but yeah, it's like the Cajun Navy, right?
Yeah.
We got to get back to the Cajun Navy. We got to get back to, but
the mountain men.
It's. And women don't really want a bunch of wimps.
No, that's not in human nature.
A woman has a particularly delicate balancing act because she's got to choose as a mate a provider and a defender who will not beat the crap out of her.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so it's a very because you got to pick one of these guys who looks like he came out of Game of Thrones, but he's gentle to you.
Sure. Meek.
Meek
the definition of meek.
And then there's this great thing where one of those kids answers on a question and they said, who's your hero? And he says, my dad. And he said, and it says, and why? And he said, and the kid fills in because he's very brave. And it says, is there anything who scares your hero? And he says, yes, my mom.
That's true too. That's also true. A healthy fear of the wife or the mother is a very important thing.
You must be obeyed. I have a friend who's a lieutenant colonel who got out because he was going to have to move again. He had teenagers, and so he did. And I said, you didn't want to become a general? And he said, it's too political. But he used to talk about the special ops guys as snake eaters. That was a funny term he used. And then he said he at one point ripped into someone for expecting him to kowtow or something. He says the only person I kowtow to is my wife.
Yeah. Yeah. Snake eater. I've heard that one before too. And that's a true thing. Those guys eat snakes when they're out on missions.
Very descriptive. The toughness of those guys is difficult to fathom.
It really is. It really, really is. Some of the stuff they've trained for and gone through. And some of the, I mean, I don't know everything because I can't tell you everything, but some of the stories I've heard, the beautiful thing is it translates into times like this. Like I know I have another group of friends that are vets out in North Carolina. If they weren't in their neighborhood, I bet 10 to 15 more people would have died in their region had those guys not been there and been
So my fraternity is going to get kicked off the campus in a way that's a bit of a railroad. That's when I was undergrad.
At Columbia?
We've got a very strong alumni association. We were the model alumni. We were the model fraternity even. And then they screwed up, and fraternities are sort of a zero tolerance for fraternities these days because manliness, for example, doesn't work.
Sure.
And we have to empty the house. It's tricky because Cornell owns it. And we gotta kind of fill it. Cornell's got to put money into it to put people in it. And so it's a balancing act because you can't just let the house sit there dormant for years.
Right.
And so one of my colleagues came up with the idea, and Cornell may bite on it. Cornell needs housing for vets. And so all of a sudden, one of my colleagues sort of went to Cornell and said, what if we turn Chi-Fi, the house, into a house for veterans? And they make their beds. They clean up after themselves. They don't sass their superiors. Someone said something about having some sort of supervisor in the house and said they're all supervisors.
Yeah, who's going to supervise those guys?
Yeah, right. And there was another house that did this previously, and they said 0 complaints.
Wow.
0 complaints.
That's
so
a great idea.
I said, by the way, if the house ever comes back on campus, let it just morph into the house for veterans. Let it become a Greek house and let the veterans stay. Don't kick them out.
That's a great idea.
Become fraternity brothers.
There probably won't be many problems around that house either.
No,
there's not going to be. There's be zero tolerance for idiot drunk.
Exactly. One of the things that really hurt universities was the 21 drinking age.
Sure.
Because it made it such that every one of these kids is breaking the law. Yeah. And so then it pushed the drinking out of sight, and it really messed things up.
And I think we're by far the oldest drinking age in America, right? There is no drinking age really in any other country. Funny question. The first person to ever set a drinking age was Adolf Hitler. I don't know if you know that. It's the first person to ever. It's a weird history that pops up. But Dave, we got about a minute and a half here before I gotta get in the car with a bunch of kids that make fun of each other, which I can't wait for. This has been awesome. I'm definitely going to ask you if you'll be on a couple months from now. We'll have plenty of new topics.
By the way, when you're done.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll forget, and I won't know to look for it. So
no, this will be posted. What is today? Today is the 12th. So this will be posted. It's Thursday. It'll be posted on Saturday.
You're gonna somehow edit the other part. You're gonna get it in there or not?
I'm gonna use it for shorts. I'm gonna pull. You have so many good one-liners there. There'll be YouTube shorts of it for sure.
It was a fun chat. It just kept getting interrupted by blackouts.
Oh my god! I still don't know. Zoom doesn't allow my camera to run very long. It did it on another.
CIA. I think the CIA is after you.
Oh yeah, well, maybe after you. You're a big timer, not me. I'm just a guy in a hoodie in a room. That's all I am.
Yeah.
But what do you want to close with today? First of all, let everybody know where they can find you, how they can help you, support you. How can they help?
The Collum Foundation always accepts donations. I haven't formed it yet, but if I do, it will. I like to say, you can find me under my desk, and you can find me at David B. Collum on Twitter. And
definitely
follow him. I'm a pretty active tweeter, but this time of year I'm an active writer, and that's why I don't know what the hell's going on in Syria. And I had this epiphany when I was really not paying attention to the world for about a week and a half, which is a long time for me. And I jump in and I go, Assad's gone? What just happened?
Yeah.
Right? He wasn't in trouble when I was on Twitter a week and a half ago. And I realized 2 things. One is that one time Diana West, in that interview I did with her, the podcast, said you can't do serious thinking and serious writing. She was doing Lou Dobbs show twice a week. She said, I couldn't stay ready to handle the daily problems that came up to be discussed and work on my book. The two just didn't mix. And I realized I'm suffering from that.
Yeah.
The second thing I realized is that the people who are not, we're writing this stuff a ton and we can't keep up.
Yeah.
The person who occasionally picks up some article off Facebook at best, or is watching CNN or MSNBC or Fox News, whatever, has no prayer of piecing together this jigsaw puzzle. Mm-hmm. Sort of a Whitney Webb assembly problem.
Yeah.
And if you took one of those people and they listened to this podcast, it's amazing. We go back and forth that our Venn diagram was about 95%, right? And you'd say so-and-so's name, and we would have talked, and they wouldn't know any of these people.
That's right.
And they wouldn't, it's the network. So I have a network of pedo hunters. I have a network of Wall Street finance guys. I have a network of guys who are just funnier than hell.
Mm-hmm.
I have these networks. It's like LinkedIn. And it's invaluable because if I have a problem, I just reach out to someone in the network. Like when I got kicked out of energy equities because Cornell decided they were too risky. But I had made a lot of money in the savings. But I reached out to 6 hedge fund managers and said, should I go back in now or not? Should I force my way back in? And they said, not right now. And that was 2016, and they halved again.
Oh, wow.
And then I started going in, but I didn't size it, right? Back to that size.
You got to size it.
And so I'm ready to size. But if we get a whoosh, 08, 09 kind of whoosh, doesn't have to destroy the banks, but just, a big correction, 50% is generic.
Yeah, that's
every
not taboo at all.
class will go down. Every last one, including Bitcoin, gold, you name it, they'll all go down.
I agree.
You don't want to be holding anything. And I learned this from my dad. I was talking to him. Your kids do listen. That you might not realize it, but they do.
Yeah, they do.
But I remember a conversation where I said to him, so let me see if I got this right. You could get rich buying real estate during the Depression, right? That was me saying you can buy at the bottom, right?
Right.
And he said, yes, but no one had any money. And I remember this conversation as I became more of an investor. I said, you have to have money at the bottom, which means you have to be in cash at the top.
That's right.
You can't ride that puppy down to the bottom and expect to buy on discount because you're out of money. You're out of assets. You've gotten crushed. So you have to be watching your neighbor get stinking rich.
And disciplined. Yep.
And disciplined. And you have to be patient. You have to sit there and wait till you see the whites of its eyes, and it can take years sometimes.
Oh, yeah. Painfully.
But this next one's going to be painful, in my opinion. I think the other mistake I made was I should have hit the market when it was at fair value, but not cheap.
Right.
What I should have done is say, how much should I own at fair value?
Right.
Not worried about the fact that I saw another halving, which was I thought a brilliantly well-reasoned prediction. What I didn't see coming was $30 trillion. No one did.
Nobody did.
And so what I should have done is say, okay, at fair value, even though it's going to have, you should start grabbing the falling knife a little bit.
Sure.
I did a little bit, but way not enough. I didn't have it right. I was like 0 equities. I bought some stuff, but I did not buy enough.
Well, I think you're ready for this time, man. And I'm going to have to wrap us up here.
Locked and loaded.
Dave, you're the best, man. I appreciate you coming on here. Can't wait to have you on again. I'm going to catch up with you this week. I have a package to send you, a gift to send you.
Oh, that's right. Oh, that's right. You promised it. My wife was excited when I told her.
She will have it by Monday. We'll have it out tomorrow.
She's about to get a biopsy. The last thing she needs is another health problem.
Oh, man. We'll be praying for it, too. That's the best gift.
I'm getting a younger model next time. There's just no way I'm doing this again. I don't even know why guys get remarried. I would think, I always think, no, I'm just going to hookers and blow, something like that. I'm just gonna, I think I'll have Mexican tonight, right? But we do it anyways.
That's love. We all find love. That's all it is.
As I like to call her, my first wife. Yeah.
Well, I'll be praying for her. I'll be praying for you also, my friend. Thank you so much, man. I
appreciate it. I don't pray yet, but you're working on me.
We'll get there. We'll get there, brother. We'll get there.
Praise the Lord. Jesus Christ.
I love it. Well, God bless you, Dave. Thank you so much for being on, man. I appreciate it.
This is fun. Appreciate. Oh, did you record this? I didn't know that.